We do have Erich Pratt with the Gun Owners of America already on the line with us here with the Gun Owners of America. Erich, thanks for joining us this morning, especially with the reaction to this news from Wal Mart yesterday. First off, what's your reaction from the Gun Owners of America?
Hey, Aaron. Well, thanks for having me. It's disappointing to see this. I mean, Walmart is obviously succumbing to the anti-gun hysteria in the country, and really they're ignoring the fact that guns are used more often to save lives than to take life. Heck, good guys and gals with guns have stopped many armed shooters at Walmarts around the country. And so, Walmart is actually ignoring this fact. I mean, there was even one in Washington State last year. A guy used his gun to shoot and kill an armed gunman who had injured a couple of people in the store. And so there have been several examples like that all around the country, all through the years. What is for certain, this decision by Walmart to restrict gun and ammunition sales, it's going to have the opposite effect. It's moving Walmart more towards creating defense-free zones, and it's not going to make people safer.
Yeah, I was sharing a little bit earlier that story out of Washington State, kind of in our neck of the woods earlier this morning as well. And I had a great conversation with a caller last hour who made the point, look, it's Walmart, it's private property, it's their own business, they can do whatever they want to here. But look, at the end of the day, this is why I'm so opposed to what Walmart is doing, is because they're fueling the anti-gun propaganda. And by doing so, they are threatening the Second Amendment rights of all Americans in the process, of their very customers.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, look, if they were really going to go after things that were causing more death, it would make more sense to target cars and doctors. More people die by car accidents. More people die actually by negligent mistakes of doctors. I mean, 7 times as many negligent mistakes that result in death through doctors than firearms death. And yet, what's interesting? You see both at Walmart. You see cars. You see doctors. And yet they're killing more people. But Walmart's not closing down the doctors' walk-in clinics at Walmarts around the country. They're not banning cars from the parking lot. See, it's not even about the mass shootings. I mean, my goodness, you're 159 times more likely to be run over and killed as a pedestrian than to be shot and killed in a mass shooting. It's really about what we've been talking about here, the political pressure that the media is exerting and the anti-gun activists and Walmart succumbing to that. And, sadly, a lot of it has to do with the fact that you never see the positive uses, or I should say rarely, see the positive uses of firearms in the media. I mean, I appreciate, a show like this, Aaron, where we're talking about the Washington case last year. So, your listeners are hearing that, but at the national level, you're only seeing the negative use. Imagine if people only ever saw and heard the negative uses of cars and doctors. We would be scared to death to ever drive to a doctor's office, right? I mean, if you only heard the negative uses.
Yeah. Well, and your auto parts reference, the Babylon Bee has this satirical piece, which Walmart to ban auto parts sales because cars are used in tragedy after tragedy all over the country. I mean, which makes a really good point here. But also there was this study. Okay, if they're really concerned about safety of people inside their stores, okay, creating some version of a gun-free zone only puts their customers at more risk, for one, but two, why don't they? They make a lot of money at Walmart. Why don't they invest in their own security guards if they're that concerned about security, instead of fueling a gun control push that will only make people less safe?
Well, you're right. It will make people less safe, and we see that of all the mass shootings in the country that dating back to the 1950s, over 90% of them occur in gun-free zones, in defense-free areas. And that's a real problem. I mean, these criminals, they may be evil, but they're not stupid. They target places where good people can't defend themselves. And sadly, what we're seeing here, while they're not totally a gun-free zone, Walmart hasn't totally gone and close that loop, because people can still conceal carry, although quite frankly it would be hard to stop that because it is concealed carry. But so they're not totally a gun-free zone. They're certainly moving that direction. And they've been tightening the noose over the years, limiting freedom. And it wouldn't be surprising to me if, a couple of years from now, we actually see them just totally done with firearms and say, hey, you can't even carry in stores. I hope that never happens, but, that's the direction they're headed.
Well, in another story we talked about yesterday on the show, there was this op-ed in the LA Times by a couple professors that pointed out that because the other angle we've seen with these mass killers is that they desperately crave attention and publicity. And this op-ed in the LA Times said that these mass killers get $75 million worth of free publicity from the mainstream media whenever they commit these mass attacks.
Yeah, if one were into restricting rights, which I am not, I think we should leave the Bill of Rights alone. But if one were actually thinking that by restricting freedom we would be safer, you would actually save more lives by restricting the First Amendment, because you're absolutely right. These killers do crave attention, and criminologists and police forensic experts have said, please, please, please stop airing their names, their pictures of these killers. I mean, the classic case was the Sandy Hook shooter, and I'm not going to use his name, but police investigators said he had a 7-foot spreadsheet of previous mass shootings and how much media attention they garnered. They said it was like a doctoral thesis, and he wanted his name to be at the top with the number killed and with the amount of media attention that it generated. And you will notice he bypassed background checks because he killed his first victim and stole her firearms. So certainly no background check in the world would have stopped that. And he targeted a gun-free zone.
Well, and look at Chicago. They had 35 shootings just over Labor Day weekend alone. I don't hear a lot of people asking the question, where did they get those guns? How did they get those guns? Because there's already massive gun control laws in effect in the city of Chicago.
And that's why we're not hearing about Chicago. Yeah, dozens of people shot, 8 people died, so that was certainly more than died, tragically in that Midland Odessa rampage. But yeah, I mean, we're not hearing about Chicago because it doesn't serve the gun controllers' purposes. Because obviously these people are bypassing the laws. They're getting their guns illegally on the streets, as most criminals do. So gun control has been completely ineffective, and we see that so clearly in Chicago. So what does the media do? They just simply ignore it.
What do you think Wal Mart is thinking here? Why are they caving, or is this a strategic decision? Do they no longer do they no longer see their customer base as middle America, as regular Americans who love their Second Amendment rights, especially when they saw how badly this backfired on Dick's Sporting Goods, for example, and how much revenue Dick's Sporting Goods lost as a result?
Yeah, that's a great point. Honestly, I think you've got business people who have virtually no familiarity with firearms or ammunition. I mean, consider their statement that they're discontinuing the sales of short-barreled rifle ammo. I mean, anybody who knows anything about guns knows that that's a ridiculous, amateurish, nonsensical statement, because there's just ammunition. Any ammo can fit a long-barreled rifle or a short-barreled rifle. And speaking of short-barreled rifles, I mean, when you actually invoke that term, that's a technical term. Any rifle that has a barrel of less than 16 inches is considered an SBR, or a short-barreled rifle, and it's highly regulated by the federal government under the NFA. That's the National Firearms Act. I think I can accurately say there is no Walmart in the nation that is selling SBRs. So I really think these decision makers at Walmart are just clueless when it comes to fire. I mean, maybe they have some handgun that was gifted to them, handed down to them. It's kind of a cultural thing, but they're really not enthusiasts or gun people, and so for them, it's not that big of a loss.
And they probably got some marketing firm in New York City or even probably Chicago, ignoring the violence in their own backyard, telling them, oh, you've got to do this, you've got to do this. Here's the other thing. The media covering this is also ignorant on basic facts. Whenever I saw multiple, even unfortunately, some of our Fox radio folks are military-style weapons. Okay, look, the microwave oven, the internet created by the military. Heck, I carried a tiny little 9mm in Iraq and Afghanistan. So is that a military style weapon according to them too? It's just so absurd.
Well, and you mentioned handguns. I mean, still to this day, most mass shootings are committed with handguns, and yet obviously the media jumps on the stories where these quote unquote black military styled firearms are used, because that's exactly what they're trying to demonize. Back in the 60s and 70s, it was demonizing handguns, but they found that the American people were not ready for enacting a handgun ban. I mean, even in places in California where they put it on the ballot, it lost because they were finding that even liberals have handguns in their home. But with the so-called assault weapon, which, we still don't know what really an assault weapon is. It's a made-up term by the left. In fact, even the New York Times admitted that it was a made-up term by Democrats to try to demonize a certain class of firearm. And that's exactly what we're seeing. When we really should be talking about the fact that these guns, like AR-15s and AK-47 style firearms, actually save a lot of lives, because when you're facing multiple attackers in your home, or you're facing riot conditions like Los Angeles riots and the Ferguson riots in Missouri from a few years back, these are exactly the type of firearms that you would want. You want more than a revolver, more than 6 shots, because when you run out of bullets and you're facing multiple people, you're out of luck. Actually, that happened to a Texas woman. She was invaded by two guys. Her home was. She unloaded her revolver into the one guy and stopped him, but once the other guy heard the click and there was no bang, he turned and savagely beat her. Now, thankfully, she survived, and what was her comment to the media? I want a gun with more bullets.
Yeah.
So this is actually, this
the adrenaline rush, everything that goes into it. Even well-trained law enforcement are going to have to use a lot of rounds to put down a suspect, because it happens so quickly and so instantaneously. And if you're out of rounds and there's still a suspect or multiple suspects threatening you, what are you supposed to do?
Well, Aaron, in Dayton, Ohio, 6 well-trained police officers, it took them 58 rounds to finally take down that shooter. I mean, imagine if there had been more shooters. Imagine if that's, you defending against a guy like this who's high on cocaine or whatever and is, very resistant to the pain. And you've got several of these guys in your... I mean, it does happen. A Houston man used his AK-47 to stop 5 home invaders this year. Last year, a Florida man fired over 30 rounds to stop 7 home invaders. I mean, these stories happen, and sadly, people, we're going to be less safe if they ban these firearms or limit magazine sizes.
Yeah, exactly right. And those are with trained professionals. I mean, imagine it, like you say, if that was just you or your wife or your daughter home alone and ending up with one of these home invasions. And we've certainly, I know our law enforcement here in Montana have had to deal with some meth-fueled psychopath, and the taser isn't necessarily going to work, and a limited magazine isn't going to work either. And the law enforcement, they even tell us, look, we can't be everywhere all the time, and it's going to take us a while to get there. Well, it might all be over by that point. Erich Pratt with the Gun Owners of America, really appreciate you joining us here, especially with this breaking news involving Wal Mart.
You're welcome, Aaron. I hope people will go to our website at gunowners.org. We've got alerts there because there's a battle brewing for our rights in Washington, D.C., so people need to take action.
All right. And tell our friend Tim Macy to bring you back here hunting with you next time he comes to town as well. I know.
Would love it.
All right. Sounds good. All right. Erich Pratt, Gun Owners of America. Yeah, always a pleasure. Yeah.